Respect is a fundamental value that should be given to all individuals, regardless of their background. It is the foundation of human dignity and essential for building a fair and just society. However, prejudice and judgment based on social status often create barriers that many must overcome. In the United States, studies have shown that children from low-income or working-class backgrounds face significant obstacles in education and career advancement due to systemic biases. According to research by the Brookings Institution, social mobility in the U.S. has declined over the years, with wealthier students having far greater access to top-tier schools, resources, and professional opportunities. This disparity highlights the importance of challenging stereotypes and ensuring that all individuals, regardless of background, are given equal opportunities to succeed. People are too often judged not by their character or actions, but by superficial aspects such as wealth, profession, or social standing. This discrimination can lead to feelings of isolation, unfair treatment, and a lack of opportunity for those who don't fit into conventional molds of success. This story is about Ethan Walker, a boy who faced such discrimination but ultimately proved that integrity, determination, and hard work define a person, not their wealth or social status. Despite being overlooked and underestimated, Ethan did not allow himself to be discouraged by the unfair judgment of others. Instead, he stood firm in his values, demonstrating that respect is something to be earned through one's actions, not something dictated by financial privilege. His journey is a powerful reminder of the resilience required to challenge stereotypes and overcome adversity. It sheds light on the importance of treating others with kindness, acknowledging the value of hard work, and never underestimating someone's potential based on where they come from. This is a lesson that resonates far beyond the walls of a classroom. It is a principle that shapes communities, workplaces, and society as a whole. Through Ethan's experience, we are reminded that respect is a two-way street. When we treat others with dignity, we, in turn, earn the respect we deserve. It was a crisp autumn morning at Westwood High, a prestigious college preparatory school in Austin, Texas, known for its rigorous academic programs, highly competitive sports teams, and a long history of producing Ivy League-bound graduates. The air buzzed with chatter as students navigated the crowded hallways, some exchanging stories about the weekend, others scrambling to finish assignments before the first bell rang. Groups of friends huddled by their lockers, laughter echoing through the tiled corridors, while a few loners immersed themselves in books, hoping to stay unnoticed. But for Ethan Walker, the day started with an uneasy feeling gnawing at his chest. Unlike most of his classmates, who came from affluent families of doctors, lawyers, and business executives, Ethan had a very different background. He was the grandson of a farmer, a profession deeply rooted in American history and essential to the country's economy. In Texas, farming wasn't just a job, it was a way of life, built on generations of hard work, resilience, and dedication to the land. His family's farm had been in operation for decades, supplying fresh produce and livestock to markets across the state. Yet, despite the vital role agriculture played in everyday life, farmers and their families were often unfairly stereotyped as uneducated or less capable, a prejudice Ethan had encountered more than once. And his mornings were not filled with leisurely breakfasts or reviewing notes for class. Instead, they began with pre-dawn chores, feeding livestock, repairing fences, and harvesting crops before rushing to school. His hands bore the calluses of hard labor, his fingers rough from gripping tools instead of pens, and his boots, no matter how much he cleaned them, always carried the faint scent of soil. Despite his quiet and respectful nature, Ethan's silence often made him an easy target for mockery. His classmates teased him for his simple clothing, for the mud that sometimes clung to his shoes, and for the way he seemed out of place among the polished and privileged students at Westwood High. Some of them whispered behind his back, calling him farm boy, a phrase that cut deeper than they realized. Ethan clenched his jaw, but kept walking, pretending not to hear. He had endured worse, but each time, it chipped away at him. Did they really think he was lesser just because he came from a farm? Because he woke up before dawn to do chores instead of sleeping in? He wanted to say something to challenge them, but he knew they wouldn't understand. Not yet, anyway. A label that carried more than just a nickname, it was a symbol of the divide between rural and urban America. In elite academic settings like Westwood High, students from agricultural backgrounds often found themselves viewed as outsiders, presumed to lack sophistication or ambition compared to their peers from wealthier, more metropolitan families. Ethan had always felt that unspoken barrier, the quiet assumption that his future was predetermined, that he was destined to remain on the farm while others pursued prestigious careers. The whispers and smirks weren't just about where he came from, they were a reflection of a deeper cultural divide, one that told him, in subtle ways, that no matter how hard he worked, he would never quite belong. A nickname that carried an undertone of condescension. In American schools, students from rural backgrounds often face stereotypes seen as less sophisticated or lacking ambition compared to their urban peers. The assumption that farm life meant a lack of intelligence or future prospects frustrated Ethan, but he had learned to endure it. However, no amount of endurance made the sting of their judgment any less real, or laughing at the way his hands were always rough compared to theirs. Others sneered at his lunch, packed with fresh ingredients straight from his family's farm, unlike the store-bought meals many of them carried. He had learned to ignore the whispers and the occasional smirks, training himself to remain unaffected. But deep down, the sting of their judgment never truly faded. He wished, just once, that they could understand the effort it took to balance the responsibilities of farm life with schoolwork, to wake up hours before dawn, to complete a full day's worth of work before even stepping foot in a classroom. More than anything, he longed to be seen for who he truly was, not just the grandson of a farmer, but a hard-working and capable student with dreams of his own, dreams that stretched beyond the endless fields and livestock pens. As Ethan entered his history class, he immediately felt the scrutinizing gaze of Ms. Patterson, his teacher. She was known for her strict discipline and sharp tongue, making even the most confident students nervous. To Ethan, her disapproving eyes felt even sharper. He often suspected she held certain biases against students like him, those who didn't come from the elite circles of Westwood High. He did his best to stay under her radar, to avoid confrontation, but today would prove to be different. The lesson began, but Ethan struggled to stay focused. His exhaustion from waking up at dawn to help on the farm clouded his thoughts, making it difficult to absorb the details of the lecture. He tried to blink away the fatigue, but it was no use. The words on the board blurred together, and the steady hum of his classmates' scribbling notes felt distant. Just as he forced himself to refocus, Miss Patterson's sharp voice cut through the air. "Mr. Walker," she snapped, arms crossed. "Perhaps if you paid more attention in class instead of whatever it is you do on that farm, you wouldn't embarrass yourself." A few students chuckled under their breath. Ethan's stomach tightened. He searched for the right words to respond, but his exhaustion made his mind feel sluggish, and all he could do was remain silent under her critical gaze. "Mr. Walker," she snapped, arms crossed, her gaze sharp as steel. "Perhaps if you paid more attention in class instead of whatever it is you do on that farm, you wouldn't embarrass yourself." Her voice dripped with condescension, each word laced with the implication that he did not belong among his classmates. The room filled with snickers, some students covering their mouths to stifle their laughter while others openly smirked. Ethan felt a lump form in his throat, his fingers tightening around the edge of his desk. He had endured taunts before, but hearing it from a teacher, in front of everyone, stung in a way he hadn't anticipated. "Honestly," Ms. Patterson continued, pacing slowly in front of the classroom, her arms still folded, "I don't see the point in wasting time on students who clearly aren't cut out for academics. Maybe you should stick to what you know best, feeding animals and working the fields. It's a noble job, isn't it? Hard work, but certainly not the kind that requires much thinking." A hush fell over the room. Even those who had laughed earlier shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some of them, while privileged, understood the weight of her words. It wasn't just an insult, it was dismissal, a complete disregard for Ethan's potential. The air in the classroom grew thick with tension, the students now watching Ethan, waiting for his response. Ethan clenched his fists, his knuckles white as he forced himself to his feet. His heart pounded in his chest, but his voice remained steady. "I may not be as book-smart as the rest," he said, his gaze unwavering, "but that doesn't mean I don't deserve respect." His words were firm, measured, carrying a quiet strength that made some of the students straighten in their seats. Ms. Patterson smirked, unimpressed. She leaned against her desk, tilting her head slightly. "Then prove it," she said. "Otherwise, you're wasting my time." Her words were final, dismissive. A challenge she expected him to fail. Ethan swallowed hard, forcing himself to keep his expression neutral. He didn't argue. Instead, he gathered his things, his hands shaking slightly as he zipped up his backpack. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the door, his footsteps heavy against the tiled floor. His humiliation burned, but even more than that, a fire had been ignited inside him. As the door clicked shut behind him, the room remained silent, the weight of what had just transpired hanging thick in the air. For the first time, many of his classmates weren't sure if they were on the right side of the laughter anymore. The next morning, an unusual commotion stirred the students. A low, rhythmic thudding echoed through the crisp morning air, growing louder with each passing second. Conversations halted, and heads turned toward the sky, scanning for the source of the sound. "Is that?" one student murmured, shading their eyes as a dark silhouette emerged in the distance. "No way," another gasped. "Is that a helicopter?" "Here." Teachers stepped out of their classrooms, their expressions shifting from confusion to concern as the powerful aircraft approached. Backpacks were slung over shoulders, students nudged one another, whispering wild theories. "Maybe it's the mayor," someone speculated, "or a government official. What if it's someone famous?" The football team, standing near the field, was the first to get a clear view. "Guys, it's landing!" On the field, one of them shouted, and within moments, the entire school swarmed toward the windows and outdoor walkways, eager to witness the unexpected arrival. As the helicopter touched down, its rotor blades sent gusts of wind whipping through the crowd, flipping notebooks open and sending loose papers flying. Eyes widened as the doors swung open, revealing a towering figure dressed in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit. The murmurs grew louder. Who was this man? And why was he here? A deep, rhythmic thudding echoed through the air, sending ripples of curiosity through the school. As students and teachers rushed outside, their eyes widened in disbelief. A sleek black helicopter was descending onto the school's football field, its rotor blades kicking up a gust of wind that sent loose papers flying and ruffled the autumn leaves scattered across the ground. The imposing aircraft was something out of a movie, something they had never expected to see at their school. Gasps filled the air as the helicopter touched down and the doors swung open. Out stepped a tall, commanding man in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit, his presence alone demanding respect. His silver streak hair was neatly combed back, and despite his age, his sharp blue eyes carried the intensity of a man who had built an empire with his bare hands. William Walker, Ethan's grandfather in name, known across Texas for his groundbreaking contributions to sustainable farming. As the founder of one of the largest organic agricultural enterprises in the region, he revolutionized the industry by implementing eco-friendly farming techniques and advocating for local farmers. His efforts not only reshaped Texas's agricultural economy, but also earned him national recognition as a pioneer in sustainable food production. Not just for his vast farmland, but for his agricultural empire that revolutionized sustainable farming. He wasn't just a farmer. He was a visionary, a businessman who had transformed family farming into a thriving industry. He supplied organic produce to top restaurants, major grocery chains, and even international markets. Beside him, Ethan walked with newfound confidence, his shoulders squared and his head held high. Gone was the nervousness of the previous day, replaced with a quiet determination. He had never seen his grandfather like this before, not just as the hardworking man who taught him how to till soil and respect the land, but as someone who commanded attention and respect from even the wealthiest and most influential figures. The crowd stood frozen as William Walker strode toward the school entrance, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. Murmurs rippled through the students, some whispering about who he was, others piecing together the connection between him and Ethan. Even the teachers exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering across their faces. They had all known Westwood High was well-funded, but few had truly grasped the power and influence behind some of their benefactors. William Walker was one of them, and today, he was here to settle a matter that had deeply offended him. Ethan followed his grandfather, walking with newfound confidence as they entered the school. The air inside the hallway was thick with anticipation. The murmurs of students and faculty alike hushed into a stunned silence as William Walker, an imposing figure with a piercing gaze, strode forward with unwavering authority. The rhythmic click of his polished shoes against the tiled floor echoed through the corridor, amplifying the weight of his presence. Even Ms. Patterson, usually composed and firm, looked visibly unsettled, her hands fidgeting slightly as she forced a polite but uncertain smile. "I understand there was an issue with my grandson in your class yesterday." William Walker's deep voice carried through the hallway, unwavering and clear. His sharp eyes locked onto Ms. Patterson, scrutinizing her every reaction. Ms. Patterson straightened, pressing her lips into a thin line as she quickly composed herself. "Mr. Walker, I assure you, I treat all my students equally," she said, though her voice betrayed a hint of nervousness. William raised a brow, unfazed. He reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out a folded document, carefully unfolding it with precision. "Is that so?" he said coolly. "Because this school receives significant funding from the Walker Foundation. In fact, I personally funded the state-of-the-art science lab you take pride in and sponsor the history program you oversee. And yet, despite all that, you saw fit to humiliate my grandson simply because of his background." Ms. Patterson paled, her composure wavering as a few gasps echoed through the crowd. Students exchanged glances, some clearly relishing the spectacle unfolding before them, while others simply stared, intrigued by the unexpected turn of events. The power dynamic had shifted dramatically, and for the first time, Ms. Patterson looked genuinely uncertain. "I raised Ethan to understand that hard work is honorable," William continued, his voice calm, yet commanding. "Perhaps you should educate yourself on that instead of looking down on those who put food on your table. The people who labor under the sun, who wake up before dawn, who dedicate their lives to producing what others take for granted, they deserve the same dignity and respect as anyone else." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, the weight of his words settling over the assembled students and teachers. Some students exchanged guilty glances, while others nodded in agreement. Even the ones who had laughed at Ethan the day before now appeared thoughtful, realizing the implications of their actions. Ethan, who had remained silent until now, took a deep breath and stepped forward. He looked directly at Ms. Patterson, his voice steady despite the emotions swelling inside him. "I don't want special treatment," he said. "I just want to be treated with respect the same as anyone else. I may not come from a wealthy family, but that doesn't mean I don't have value. I work hard every day, and I will continue to do so, but no one should be made to feel lesser because of where they come from." Ms. Patterson exhaled shakily, the arrogance that once colored her face now replaced by discomfort and shame. A flood of realization coursed through her. How many other students had she unfairly judged over the years? She had always prided herself on being an educator, but had she truly fostered an environment of learning, or had she unknowingly reinforced the very biases that limited students like Ethan? Her mind replayed the moment she had dismissed him in front of the class, the laughter of the other students echoing in her ears. It was easy to excuse her words as discipline, as setting high expectations, but deep down, she now saw them for what they were: prejudice masked as authority. Ethan had shown a strength she had not expected, and in that moment, she realized that education was not just about knowledge, but about nurturing resilience, fairness, and respect. She glanced around at the watching students, their eyes now assessing her as much as they had Ethan. Slowly, she met his gaze, her voice softer than before. Understand, she said. I apologize, Ethan. I will do better. A flood of realization coursed through her. How many other students had she unfairly judged over the years? She had always prided herself on being an educator, but had she truly fostered an environment of learning, or had she unknowingly reinforced the very biases that limited students like Ethan? Her mind replayed the moment she had dismissed him in front of the class, the laughter of the other students echoing in her ears. It was easy to excuse her words as discipline, as setting high expectations, but deep down, she now saw them for what they were: prejudice masked as authority. Ethan had shown a strength she had not expected, and in that moment, she realized that education was not just about knowledge, but about nurturing resilience, fairness, and respect. She glanced around at the watching students, their eyes now assessing her as much as they had Ethan. Slowly, she met his gaze, her voice softer than before. Understand, she said. I apologize, Ethan. I will do better. She glanced around at the watching students, her authority diminished in the face of the undeniable truth. Finally, she met Ethan's eyes and gave a small nod. I understand, she said, her voice softer than before. I apologize, Ethan. I will do better. A small, satisfied smile played at William Walker's lips as he observed his grandson. Good, he said, his voice warm yet firm. Because respect isn't given based on wealth or status. It's earned through integrity and hard work. And my grandson is both. He glanced at Ethan with pride, then turned to the crowd. And I hope that today, everyone here learns a lesson about judging others too quickly. Hard work and honesty are the real measures of a person, not the size of their bank account. A moment of silence passed before the students erupted into applause, their admiration for Ethan apparent. Many gave him nods of respect, some even patting him on the back. The boy who had once been an outsider now stood taller than ever, not because of his grandfather's influence, but because he had proven himself through courage, humility, and perseverance. Conclusion. Cheers erupted from the students, their voices echoing down the hallways as they clapped and cheered for Ethan. Among them, one of his former bullies, Jason, hesitated before stepping forward. The same student who had once mocked Ethan for his calloused hands now looked at him with a mixture of guilt and admiration. Hey, Ethan, Jason started, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. I guess I never really thought about what you go through every day. I was wrong to judge you. You're tougher than any of us. Ethan studied him for a moment before nodding. It's not about being tough. It's about respect. We all have our struggles. We just need to stop looking down on each other. Jason extended his hand, and after a brief pause, Ethan shook it. The moment wasn't grand or dramatic, but spoke volumes. A small ripple of change had begun, and the students who had once dismissed Ethan as just a farm boy now saw him for who he truly was: an equal, a leader, and someone who had earned their respect. Many students who had previously dismissed him as just a farm boy now looked at him with newfound admiration, some even stepping forward to shake his hand or pat him on the back. It was a rare moment of realization among them, a lesson learned not from books or lectures, but from the courage and integrity of one of their own peers. From that day on, Ethan walked through the halls with his head held high. The stares he once received, the judgment, the smirks had been replaced by nods of acknowledgement and even admiration. The classmates who had once ignored or ridiculed him now treated him as an equal, some even stopping to ask about his family's farm or how he managed to balance his responsibilities. One afternoon, as he was packing his books, a student named Daniel, one of the more outspoken kids who had laughed at him before, approached hesitantly. Hey, Ethan, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. I just wanted to say, I was wrong about you. I thought you were just some farm kid, but I see now how much work you put in. I respect that. Ethan studied him for a moment, then offered a small smile. Thanks, Daniel. I appreciate that. Their conversation was brief, but it meant something. It was a sign that change had begun, that people were starting to see him and others like him in a different light. Respect wasn't just demanded, it was earned. And Ethan had earned his place, not by wealth or status, but by proving his worth through integrity and perseverance. It wasn't his grandfather's wealth or influence that changed how people saw him, but rather the strength of his character and the respect he had earned through his resilience. Teachers, students, and even staff members who had once overlooked him now saw him in a different light. He was no longer just a quiet boy with calloused hands. He was someone who had proven that dignity isn't measured by books, bank accounts, or social status. It's defined by how we carry ourselves in the face of adversity, by how we rise after being pushed down, and by how we stand up for ourselves even when the odds are stacked against us. As for Ms. Patterson, she never underestimated another student again. Her perspective on education and success had been altered that day, making her reconsider the importance of opportunity and fairness in the classroom. In the broader context of American education, where issues of equity and access continue to shape discussions on student success, she realized that intelligence and capability come in many forms. She now understood that true academic growth was not just about privilege or preparation, but about recognizing potential in every student, regardless of their background. And though she remained strict in her teaching methods, there was a newfound respect in the way she addressed all of her students, and understanding that intelligence and capability could come in many forms, not just in academic achievements, but in perseverance, work ethic, and self-respect. And as for Ms. Patterson, she never underestimated another student again. Final thoughts. This story teaches us a valuable lesson: respect is not something that should be given based on privilege or social standing. True respect is earned through hard work, perseverance, and integrity. No one should be judged for their background, but rather for their character and actions. If this story inspired you, leave a comment with "respect first" below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories that remind us of the power of integrity and perseverance.